Okay, Forever Hardcore is the Jeremy Borash ECW documentary. It does seem like he took bits and pieces from other documentaries and kind of blended them together. Now, if you never really watched ECW, this is a great way to hear the majority of the really intense stories that happened. You know, like the Sandman crucifixion, James Mitchell pretty much blowing part of his hand off. You know, the night when everything went crazy, the rise of the franchise, when they brought in Raven, how the Blue World Order happened, what they did with, I think it was Kimona, when they had her dance, why they had her dance. So this is a really decent background of pretty much everything ECW, with talking to the majority of people that had a really big hand in it. So of course for people who, you're not going to hear the Dudleys talking, you know, you're not going to hear Rob Van Dam, you're not going to hear Paul Heyman. So you're hearing from the people who their careers, I hate to say peaked, but for essentially peaked during the ECW time, and aren't working for, well, I guess currently the major promotion. This of course was filmed for 2005, so therefore, you know, certain people who probably would have been interviewed could work for TNA or for the E at that time. So a great job going over, like I said, it's all of the major topics that happened. Everything has its own little vignette to go through. So if you're a fan of ECW, you know, you might hear bits and pieces that, you know, I only heard a couple things that I really wasn't truly well aware of. I know for the crucifixion angle, I know that was when Kurt Angle showed up, and he was pissed and he didn't want anything to do with ECW, which makes sense. But from what I remember being told, Sandman, Raven, and Raven's crew knew what they were going to do, but Paul Heyman didn't. I always thought Paul Heyman was entirely oblivious to what was going on, but he wasn't. He was in on it. That was interesting. Beyond that, you know, I watched enough documentaries. I watched the New Jack documentary. I've seen multiple other ones that deal very specifically with very specific topics. You know, the New Jack one was great. You know, New Jack is probably one of the most hardcore wrestlers ever, next to someone like Terry Funk. And his documentary is fantastic. You know, if you wanted to learn entirely about what a life of hardcore wrestling and crazy drops and falls will do to your body, you watch the New Jack documentary. I found it ironic that I watched the documentary short after I watched the Legends of Wrestling on the E Network, WWE Network, that dealt with the rise of hardcore. I thought it was kind of interesting. You know, 'cause I watched the one where you have people who, you know, may or may not have really found a fantastic niche in the world of hardcore, and even kind of like your ECW, push the envelope, push it too hard, and essentially the candle burned bright, it burned fast, and it burned out. It's interesting hearing it from the people who somewhat benefited from it. ECW did bring rise to the Attitude Era. It's interesting hearing people from the E talk about it, while people were from WCW at the time. And then hearing the people who actually lived and breathed it. Very interesting documentary, especially when you get to compare and contrast those two. So if you're a fan of wrestling and you weren't watching during the ECW era, and I'll be honest, ECW, when they put on pay-per-views, it was normally the cheapest pay-per-view, and you normally had solid wrestling from beginning to end. You know, I lived in the area where I think we got ECW towards the very end. It was on like TNT very late at night. And if you didn't set your VCR to record it, probably one of your buddies did, and you would watch it. And it was just some of the craziest, most over-the-top stuff. And it was filmed in this really great, gritty sort of, you know, it was dark and gritty wrestling filmed in a dark, gritty format that really enhanced the dark grittiness of it. And once they kind of really started getting going, that's when the wheels fell off. So, interesting documentary. I definitely recommend people checking it out if you're a wrestling fan. Even if you're more of a wrestling purist and you're like, man, ECW is crap, you might feel the same way about XPW and CZW, but if you watch this one, you'll kind of go, okay, I get it. I understand what they were going for. I still hear the passion in their voices, and that's fantastic for all the crazy things they're doing to their bodies. They really did do it with the idea of, you know, we're going to do this, it's different, it's amazing, we're going to drive this awesome point home. So, really good, really well done documentary.